Hello, this is Brian Scuttle of Sonic Cinema. Before we dive into my interview with Kris Bowers, who is the co-director and composer behind A Concerto's A Conversation, the Oscar-nominated short film, I wanted to point out that for the first minute and 15 seconds, the sound is not up to snuff compared to the rest of the interview. I do apologize about that. There were some technical issues on the night that we were interviewing, and I rectified them for most of the interview, but that first minute 15 is going to sound louder and a little bit distorted. I think I got it taken care of as much as I could, though, and I hope you enjoy my interview with Kris Bowers in spite of it. Thank you. First of all, congratulations on the Oscar nomination. It's very well deserved. I've had the chance to watch the film twice now, and I really loved it. It's just a beautiful film. So, first of all, congratulations.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that.
The first question I normally ask is, what was the inspiration behind the film? But you say it pretty plainly in the context of the film. So one of the things that was most interesting to me is as a composer going to a cinematic medium to tell your story as a director, was there any type of thought process that normally you think about the way you think about things as a composer that you were able to translate into being a film director?
I think with this one, it was really just trying to focus on pulling out my grandfather's story and the elements that I already knew, and then trying to see if there's anything else there. And a lot of the shape of the film itself really is just because of the shape of my grandfather's story as it stands. And so a lot of it was really kind of driven by that.
I will say, I saw the film at Sundance this year, and when you see it in that context, it's you don't have, especially if you're trying to get a lot in, it's hard to get. It's really hard sometimes to let a film, especially a short film, really resonate with you and sit with you. When I watched it again last night in preparation for this interview, it's funny because I couldn't help but think of my own grandfather and my own memories of my grandfather, because like we talked about a little bit before the interview started. I've composed over the years, and one of the things that I did after he passed away was I actually wrote a piece of music inspired by those feelings I was having when he passed away. And it's funny because of the fact that it's not a strict classical concerto, but it was a piece with very pronounced solo for trombone, which was my primary instrument, as well as electronic sounds, because electronic music is kind of where my feelings are. So it was interesting that the name of the film, A Concerto's A Conversation, really connected with me in that respect, and I love the way that the film takes on some of the structure of a concerto itself.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really awesome you felt that way. Yeah.
Were there any particular challenges that you had when it came to deciding to tell your grandfather's story on film?
I think some of the challenges were just, trying to make sure that I could get everything, out of him. I feel like my grandfather, not only getting a bit older, but, I think there's some of the story that he's totally happy to tell, and then other things that I think that take a little bit of time to kind of coax out of him, or at least for him to kind of think a little bit deeper about, because he's told the story so many times on a surface level, and wanting to get some of those grittier details or things that maybe I hadn't heard before, and especially the period with the cleaners. I think that's a lot of information from him that I hadn't really heard before, as far as the difficulties getting it started and a lot of the he tried to like work around those difficulties and things like that. So trying to find a way to ask those things over time in a way that would get more information the more that I asked, I guess.
Mm-hmm. What was it like working on the film both as subject as well as a director?
I think one, it definitely meant trusting my co-director Ben Proudfoot a decent amount, just because also him wanting to create this very comfortable environment. And I think the first day I showed up with like a button-up shirt and I was like a little dressed up, and he was like, no, like, what would you really wear to your grandparents' house? Like, what would you really be wearing if you were up late at night working right now? And being open to how he is like, wanting me to be presented or perceived or however that is, but also to feel comfortable and for me to feel a little bit more myself. And I think that was something that took a second to warm up to, being able to be that like open and comfortable and vulnerable. And I kind of like got what he was going for, then it felt pretty easy. Yeah.
I would imagine that's a bit of a, I mean, it's not quite the same thing if, an actor's directing a movie because they're still playing a character, but the fact that you're being yourself, that comfort level is probably something that would take some getting used to because of the fact that this is a documentary.
Yeah, and I think it was really helpful that, we were doing this pretty much by ourselves when we first started. It wasn't a New York Times piece, and the LA Phil had originally commissioned it, but I think by the time we started shooting it, they weren't as involved anymore. And so it was really just something that we saw a lot of value in and really were excited about. And I think that also helped me feel like at that point I could then approach the conversation like I'm just having a conversation with my grandfather, and I just want to get as much information from him as possible, because I don't know if I'll ever be able to sit down and like record a conversation with him for this amount of time in this way ever again. And I think being able to just settle into that feeling and that relationship and kind of not even think about not having anybody else involved at that point allowed me to not also think about like, who's watching this or where it's going, just kind of like be there and be present.
As you also wrote the music in the film, and we do hear some of the concerto that frames the piece, but when you were writing underscore for the film as well, were there any added challenges to you compared to how you would normally think about film score because of the fact that because of the way that the structure of this film is?
Yeah, definitely. I think one, trying to figure out how to set up that moment where we hear the concerto, and how, wanting that to feel as big and emotional as that moment in the concerto is, but at the same time not wanting that to be the sound of the rest of the score. So trying to find that balance of like how we're going to score it and what's the palette going to be. And I used all the themes in the score are themes from the concerto itself that I just repurposed and figured out how to like adapt to the pacing and the feel of the short. And then again, building toward this moment where we hear it. And I think a big challenge was actually the section where I had to score my own career and life and all of that. One thing that Ben actually suggested that I took him up on that was really helpful was scoring that not to picture, and me just playing the piece, focusing on like the emotion that I was trying to convey, whether it's like for me thinking of that section like gratitude for my family or like warmth or love for my family and all of that, just playing the piece from that mindset and playing it more like almost like a gospel hymn essentially. And then Ben and our editor Lucas Dong cut to that, and I think that was a big help in that little section.
Yeah. Now that you have directed, are there any other ideas that you're having for films, whether they're narrative or documentaries that you want to tell, or is this just a sort of a one-off labor of love?
It's definitely something that I've been interested in for a while. It's funny, Ben and I actually met about 5 years ago because I was directing a short film that I wrote, and his company lent me the equipment and all this stuff, and it ended up being like, I think it's it's something that I'm slightly proud of, but it probably will never see the light of day. It's like a very bad student film, essentially. Yeah. But I think that, I've always been, for me, music was just an extension of storytelling. Like I always felt like, for me, playing piano was about conveying an emotion, trying to tell a story. If I ever wrote a piece of music, it was like, what story am I trying to tell in that piece of music? And so, and I've always been in love with like ballet or even opera and different things like that. So like, for me, trying to figure out a way to have music be more of the driving force in the narrative is something that I'm really excited by. And my next album has this narrative element that I'm working on with my wife. And then Ben and I are working on with my wife as well, like an iteration on this idea of conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. I look forward to I look forward to that. I know, like, as somebody who's done composing over the years, as somebody who even tried doing narrative filmmaking at one point, it is one of those things where it's like you do start to look at these different things. I get that impression. I get that feeling of like just another extension of the storytelling that you want to tell, and I definitely understand that impulse, and I definitely respect that impulse. And yeah, that sounds really exciting. I can't wait to see and hear what that's going to turn into, especially after seeing this and really having the impression that it left on me.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it, and good luck with the Academy Awards. I would imagine in this particular case, because of the personal nature of it, the nomination is certainly as much of a reward as if you were to win. But I do think it is completely deserving if it does win. So good luck. Good luck in about a month. So
yeah, thanks so much, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you.